Shabbos, Daf and Peidalad, Fruit Tzadi, Daf Peidalad. Gemara continues a discussion begun on Pei Gimel. Gemara brings the Shita of Hanania that the reason a ship is not Mekabelas Tumah is because we compare Kalim to a sack. We say a sack is Tameh only insofar as it is Metaltel Malei V'Reikon, it's movable whether empty or full. So all Kalim of the types that are compared to sack are Mekablim Tumah only if they're movable Malei V'Reikon. A ship is too big and heavy to Metaltel Malei V'Reikon. When it's full, when it's loaded, it can't be moved. Gemara says, according to Hanania, Sfinas Yardain, a small ship, a ship that goes in a small river, can be moved even when it's full, and therefore, according to Hanania, a Sfinas Yardain is Mekabelas Tumah. So on Daf Peidalad, the Gemara says, Tiltal Adei Shvarim Shmei Tiltal. Is that so, even though it's only movable by oxen? That's what Hanania holds. Hanania holds, the Gemara says, yes, that even if a person can't carry the ship around, even if it's a small ship, it's still too big for a person to carry. But if it's Metaltal Adei Shvarim, if oxen can move it, it's still considered Metaltal Malei V'Reikon, and it is Mekabelas Tumah. Tosha says this is true even if it has a capacity of 40 sa. Usually, ordinary Kalim, the Gemara, we always assume that a Kali that it has the capacity of 40 sa is not Metaltal Malei because it would be too heavy when it's full. But this ship, which is moved by the Shvarim, since the way it's used is to be moved even when it's full, even though it's larger than the share of 40 sa, it's larger than what we usually call Kliya Baba Mida, it is still Mekabelas Tumah. This has some practical import, halacha l'maisa. We discussed last week the question of planes, whether a Kohen in a plane flying over a graveyard, whether the Kohen is considered is becoming tamei this way and therefore prohibited to fly there, or not for various reasons. One of the issues is whether the plane can be a chatzitza, barrier, to shield the Kohen from the tumah. There are several reasons why it might not be able to. One of them is that the plane itself is Mekabel Tumah. If the plane is Mekabel Tumah, it can't be Chotzitz B'nei Tumah. On the other hand, the plane is Baba Mida. The plane has a capacity of 40 sa. So do we apply this rule that a Keli which is too large is not Mekabel Tumah to airplanes? So Rabbi J. David Bleich, in a long, detailed essay on this topic, brings a couple of reasons why that would not apply. First, he says, we just saw in the Gemara in Tosfos, even a Kliya Baba Mida, if it's movable anyway, if it is typically used and moved, even when it's full, even if it's larger than 40 sa, it's still Mekabel Tumah, and it's still not Chotzitz B'nei Tumah. Now, you could argue, he says, that the Chazon Ish suggests that this is only if it's movable by humans, but if it's or animals at least. Shvarim, the Gemara says, but cars and trains, which are not movable by humans or animals, only by their engines, maybe that's not considered Metaltal Malei V'Reikon. Other Achronim, he says, say no, that as long as by human technology, as long as it's based on human effort, they can be moved, even if it requires an engine. Chazon Ish himself entertains that. Elsewhere, that automobiles would be Mekabel Tumah because of this reason. Some say even steam wagons, even if the powered by steam, the locomotion, that's still considered Metaltal Malei V'Reikon. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, even if we're going to say that an airplane or a train is not considered movable by humans because a human can't push it, an animal can't pull it, nevertheless, he says a car would be considered Metaltal Malei V'Reikon because usually you drive your car with the engine and gas. If there's no gas, you could hook it up to a pair of oxen and they could pull it. We don't do that very often, he says, but it is movable. So that certainly, he says, would be considered Metaltal Malei V'Reikon. Planes and trains, which by no means can be moved by animals, that is subject to debate. Rav Black says anyway, the whole application of the concept of Kliya Baba Mida to an airplane is a category error because it only applies to those kalim of those materials that the pasuk compares to sack, like a wooden kli. It does not apply to other kalim, and it would not apply to specifically. It would not apply to a metal keli like an airplane. An airplane has no din of Baba Mida, no din of Metaltal Malei V'Reikon. So the Gemara anyway wouldn't really be applicable to a typical airplane made of metal. Daf Pei Hey, the Gemara is discussing kilayim. So there's a rule in Hilchos Kilayim that two species cannot be planted in close enough proximity that one is yonik from the other, that one derives nourishment and substance from the earth, from the vegetable, from the nearby plant. And the Gemara says, how do we know? How can we be assured that Chazal knew these things, that Chazal understood that Yonika works laterally, that horizontally a plant planted over here can be yonik, can be nourished from a plant planted nearby, or horizontally distant? So the Gemara says, Darshan's a pasuk, Lo sasik gvul re'echa, you shall not violate the gvul, the boundary of re'echa, your fellow man, asher gavlu rishonim, that was established by earlier generations. What does that mean? So the Gemara says, who are the Rishonim? The Rishonim are the ancient pagans, the Bnei Seir Hachari, Yoshevei Haaretz. They were experts in agronomy, they knew what to plant where, they knew how far things were yonik. This was known for a long time. Those are the Rishonim and Chazal, the Torah, Chazal established this rule that when it comes to Kalayim, you have to be careful, therefore, not to plant nearby, because we know this agronomic principle that Yanika occurs laterally. What does the pasuk L'sas L'Oreach actually mean? What is the Torah telling us not to do according to this interpretation? So we have an apparent machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says it's a civil law. Don't plant plants too close to the edge of your neighbor's property, because they will pull in some Yanika and take nourishment and take nutrients out of his property. So there's a civil rule that you can't do that. It's not fair to your neighbor. It's an infringement upon his rights to plant too close to his border. Tosfos apparently understands, Maram explains it's machlokes, Tosfos apparently understands it's a law in Kilayim. Planting two species that are Kilayim with each other, too close to each other, violates the prohibition of L'sasig V'Oreacha. Tosfos asks, so a person who plants Kilayim should get two malchus. One because of Lo Sizra, you're not allowed to plant Kilayim. One because of L'sasig V'O. The Tosfos struggles to explain why there's no malchus for L'sasig. Maybe he says the pasuk talks about other things also, and it's a lav shebachlalos, he says, or because since the Torah includes other forms of theft, and theft is typically subject to being returned, if nitin le'shavim, there's no malchus for that. But Tosfos seems to learn it's a lav d'oraisa, a biblical prohibition, but it's a kalayim sort of prohibition. And Rashi seems to learn it's a civil law, it's a civil infraction of your neighbor's property rights. The pasuk shot of L'sasig V'Oreacha, and that's how it's understood by Chazal themselves and Sifri and elsewhere, is that it means it's a prohibition of theft against actually moving the boundary markers. Gvul means literally the boundary of the two fields. Don't tamper with boundaries to steal the property of your neighbor. Isn't that already prohibited as L'sigzel? The Sifri says yes, but you get two lavim. In Eretz Yisrael, you get the lav of Gzela and L'sasig. In Chutz La'aretz, it's regular Gzela. It's a separate lav for Gzela in Eretz Yisrael. Gzela of real estate. The Sifri gives a number of other explanations of L'sasig, a number of other things that may be included. If you alter the boundaries of the different tribes of the Shvatim, that's L'sasig. If you switch the names of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, if the Talmud has statements, some are attributed to Rabbi Eliezer, some to Rabbi Yeshua, if you misattribute them, that's L'sasig V'O, L'sasig V'Oreacha. Some of these things, this one in particular, there's a question in the Achronim whether these are real dinim d'oraisa, or whether these are just asmachtas, these are rabbinic prohibitions. That's also L'sasig. If a person sells ancestral property, mocher karka avosav, that's L'sasig. Now, in the time of the Rishonim, starting from the Rambam's time at least already, we find L'sasig, its most common use today, seems to be a misuse. The Rambam already uses it this way, though, that Hasagas Gvul, L'sasig V'Oreacha, is used to mean do not improperly compete, do not infringe on someone's livelihood by competing with him unfairly. Rambam says if you're Yorid Lomnus Chavero, you compete unfairly, you are B'chlal Masig V'Oreacha. Radbaz says, writing in the 16th century, this is a common expression, it's a common use of the term, he says, but it's not really correct. He says, L'fi ha'emes, that's not what the pasuk is talking about, it's just a popular idiom. L'sasig does not apply to that. Various Rishonim and Achronim do apply L'sasig to that, though it's not clear again if it's just a rhetorical flourish or it really means that that's also L'sasig. This idea of switching Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, misattributing, some say that's only because the halacha follows Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer is shamuti, we don't paskin like him, so by changing the names, you're actually going to affect the halacha. But the Rav poskim say that you have to be careful with it. When they suggest when it says re in the Gemara, reish yud, you shouldn't just say Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda, because if you get it wrong, that's L'sasig V'O. You can be talcha. They say no. Maybe it's a particular concern when it's Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, like the Sifri says, because that's something which could affect the actual halacha, or perhaps if it's only if you know for sure which way it's supposed to be, and you deliberately and you knowingly misattribute, not if you're not sure and you guess. So there are different ways to understand how far to take this prohibition. There are tshuvas in the Achronim. There are tshuvas in the Machne Chaim about a sofer who was caught plagiarizing. He took other correspondence that rabbis had written to him and he published it under his own name to get credit for it, to sell books. And the poskim were very upset at him. This is a terrible thing to plagiarize, to deceive the public, to take credit for other people's work. They discuss what avera has he done, and they say maybe he violates L'sasig V'Oreacha. So they say no. Maybe it's only Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua because Rabbi Eliezer is shamuti. They discuss whether you really violate this law. I'll call upon him. There are many different interpretations of what the law means. It's not clear how many are deraisa and drabanan. Our Gemara has an interesting one According to Rashi, it means don't plant too close to your neighbor because it's not fair to him. According to Tosfos, it's a variation of a kalayim prohibition. Don't plant two species too near each other. Pevav, the Mishnah says that we're rochet, we wash the milah, the affected area of the circumcision, on the third day, even on Shabbos. That's what that darshans a pasuk, because it's dangerous. It has to be done. The poskim say that means even on Shabbos, even by a Jew, even if a Jew has to machal Shabbos to heat up the water, it's considered sakana. The Beis Yosef say it's a sakana, and therefore you do it. Beis Yosef says, though, that's only in the time of the Talmud. We don't do this today. He says today it's not so dangerous. We don't follow this anymore. Dr. Moshe says, what does that mean? If it's dangerous, it's dangerous. So, nevertheless, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that this was only true in the time of the Talmud. He says today it is, we don't do this today. It's not our minhag, and it's not so dangerous. Shabur says nishtana teva. Nature has changed in this regard. The Ramah says it's still somewhat dangerous, so we do it, but not via Yisrael. We treat them like a chola. But both Mechaber and the Ramah agree that it's not really as dangerous as it was in the time of Chazal. The way the Mishabur explains nishtana teva, it's one of the areas in which nature has changed from Chazal. Rav Kook has a very interesting discussion of this Gemara. Rav Kook argues vehemently. This is one of the areas in which he is an arch traditionalist, not like people sometimes think that he's always a reformer. Rav Kook argues he was very much insisted that matzitza b'peh, oral suction, be performed during a bris milah. Many people were against it, particularly more modern Jews were against it. Even today, many Mo'alim don't do actual oral suction. They use tubes and sponges and other things. Many conservative poskim, conservative in the sense of conserving the old ways, insisted that matzitza must be done, period, must be done b'peh. The argument to those who said you don't need it is because the Gemara says you do it because of sakana. If you don't do it, it's a sakana. Today we have our own scientific understanding, and we don't believe there's any sakana in not doing it. Therefore, we ignore or we don't take as seriously the injunctions of Chazal because we rely on our science. Rav Kook was vehemently opposed to this. He said we have no right to do that. That Chazal said it's true, and even if we think it's not true, maybe it's a suffix. He says it's true. That's the question of pikuach nefesh or chol Shabbos or pikuach nefesh. We'll disregard Chazal's advice if we feel we have to save a life. He says, but on the other hand, Chazal said this is dangerous. We're going to say it's not dangerous and just skip it. He says you can't do that. He says the most the contemporary medical establishment can do is to create a suffix and say maybe. You can't just dismiss the words of Chazal. Matzitza b'peh is a sakana. They said it is. We have no right to assume it's not. And you must do matzitza b'peh b'zman hazeh. What about our Gemara? He says our Gemara, we don't do this rechitza. We don't heat up water and do this and follow this procedure the Talmud says you need to do. The Mishnah and the Gemara say you need to do. Rav Kook struggles with this. He concludes that rechitza was never something that was inherently necessary. It was only people who were used to it, if they were regilos to do it, then it became a sakana not to do it. But if you don't need it, it's subjective, then it's not a sakana. But anything that Chazal declared, like matzitza, is objectively a sakana. We have no right to say it's not a sakana, and therefore it must be done like matzitza, even if we don't think it is still a sakana b'zman hazeh. The Mishnah also talks about paleta shifra zera, a woman who is with her husband, and then the shifra zera, the semen, is emitted. So that renders her tameh until the third day. The Mishnah says, "B'yom hashlishi." We derive that from the schedule of Matan Torah, the days preceding it. The Gemara elaborates further. The Gemara brings several opinions that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says on the third day it's already tar. Rabbi Shmuel says it depends. Sometimes four onos, meaning 4 half days, 4 12-hour periods. Sometimes 5 onos, sometimes 6 onos. Rabbi Kiva says la'olam 5 onos. Later the Gemara says on Amud Beis, the Gemara says Zu Divrei Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Kiva, the Chachamim omrim 6 onos shleimus b'inan. We always need 6 onos. There are some Rishonim who learn 6 onos means 6 12-hour periods, which means essentially 3 days, 3 24-hour days. There are some Rishonim who learn that this is the sugya is discussing Tumah and Tara, where they had the Mikdash and Truma and Kodshim and Taras. But most Rishonim learn that this applies even Bizman Hazeh. It applies to a woman who after she gets her period, she needs to go to the mikveh. She has to have 7 clean days. The halacha shikva zera is soseres. We paskin that if she has a seminal emission, that would stop that would stop her count. That would cause problems with her count, and therefore a woman cannot begin counting her 7 clean days, her zayin nikiyim, until the required number of onos have passed. How many is the required number of onos? So again, we have a number of shittas in the Gemara. While there is the Rambam and some opinions that follow the shorter periods, The consensus of most Rishonim and Achronim, and the consensus, the strong consensus today, is we follow the opinion of the last opinion, 6 onos. We require 3 24-hour days, which actually translates to 4 days, because if the woman was with her husband in the middle of some night, let's say Motzei Shabbos, so then she can't count Sunday because that Shuvah Zera is still potent. She can't count Monday. She can't count Tuesday. She can't even count Wednesday because let's say she was with her husband at 12 o'clock. Shkia Tzeitzil Chava might be 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and she was with her husband 12 o'clock. So if on Wednesday evening, if some of the semen is emitted at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, it's already considered Wednesday. It's already considered the night leading into Yom Revi'i, the night leading into Wednesday. In halacha, the night before is the beginning of the day, and since it was before the 72-hour period, then it would still make her tummy. So Wednesday, so the entire Wednesday can't count either. Sunday can't count Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So the first of her 7 clean days would be Thursday. That is the Ikar Din, according to most Rishonim, and that is the shita followed by many Sfardim. Ashkenazim have adopted a Chumrah, and some Sfardim as well, based on some of the later Rishonim, to add 1 more day because of technical reasons, so they add a 5th day. So the standard custom in Ashkenaz today is that we only start counting Zayin Nekiyim under normal circumstances after 5 days have passed. Amongst Fardim, it's split. Some count after 4 full days. Some start counting on the 5th day, and some start counting like Ashkenazim do on the 6th day. Some Fardim adopt additional chumras, even more than Ashkenazim, that they require not just 5 days, but 6 days or even 7 days. But the 2 dominant customs are either 4 days or 5 days. There are certain exceptions which we can be more lenient about not counting those 4 or 5 days. But the normal practice is Ashkenazim have 5 days based on this Gemara and wait 5 days. If they were Mishamesh, Motzei Shabbos, they don't count Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And Sfardim wait at least 4, and some Sfardim wait 5. The Gemara talks about what is the halacha regarding this rule that Shuvah Zera retains its potency and is still considered intact and matame until the 6 onos. What about if it is a Shuvah Zera of a Jew inside the body of a non-Jew? Why should there be any difference? These are biological facts. Why should there be any variation between Jews and non-Jews? The Gemara says on the one hand, Jews are de'igi b'mitzvahs because they worry about mitzvahs. Jews are anxious. Jews worry. So chavel gufayu, their bodies are warmer. They're hotter in some. I don't know if you can measure this. I'm not sure what this means, but this is what the Gemara says. But akum, non-Jews don't have the same anxiety about mitzvahs, so they don't have this. On the other hand, he says akum eat shkatim v'ramasim. They eat shellfish and crickets and whatnot, snails. So because of that warms up their temperature. Again, I don't know if this warming is subject to any kind of measurement, but this is what the Gemara says. So the Chasam Sofer, in a number of places, in his Kedushim here, in his Kedushim in other places, in his Tshuvas, Chasam Sofer argues, therefore, that it should not be possible to conclusively rely on medical research conducted by non-Jews upon non-Jewish subjects, because conclusions that they draw based on non-Jewish subjects will not necessarily be valid for Jews, because the Gemara says Jews and non-Jews are fundamentally different. Chasam Sofer feels this very strongly. He doesn't just throw this out there as a trial balloon. He repeats this in at least 3 places in his writings. Kashli lismak b'shum hara al rofes manenu. We can't rely on them. He says we can't. It's true. Of course, he says for Chilul Shabbos to rely on them to tell someone to eat on Yom Kippur because his life is in danger. To Machal Shabbos, of course we do that because we believe them at least that it's a suffix. At least, like we said before from Rav Kook, at least the possibility that they're right we consider. But to rely on them for purposes of nida and other contexts, he says it's very hard. He says that he doesn't know how we can rely on research conducted upon non-Jews, how we can automatically assume that it's valid for Jews. The Gemara on Pei Zayin, again, the Gemara begins on Daf Pei Vav. The Gemara goes through the chronology of Matan Torah. So the Gemara says that there's machlokes whether Matan Torah occurred on the 6th day of Sivan or the 7th day of Sivan. The Gemara explains they all agree that they came to Har Sinai on Rosh Chodesh, and they all agree that the Torah was given on Shabbos. The question was Rosh Chodesh on Sunday or Monday? Therefore, was the Shabbos of Sivan, was that the 6th day of the month or the 7th day of the month? The Gemara goes through when all the different statements of Moshe, when all the conversations occurred, when he told them to separate from their wives, which explains how many onos we assume occurred between the Prisha and Matan Torah. But the machlokes is whether, so the Gemara explains, right, if the Prisha was done earlier in the week, then there are more onos between if the Prisha was done Wednesday for Shabbos, then there can be 6 onos. If the Prisha was done on Thursday, then there were fewer onos. So the Magen Avraham asks a famous question. Magen Avraham asks that things don't add up, he says, because we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, we paskin that there are 6 onos, which is based on the shita that they came to Har Sinai on Sunday, and Prisha, separating from the women, was done on Wednesday, which gives you 6 onos between Wednesday and Shabbos. And that it would follow, therefore, according to our halacha and Yordei and the laws of Nida, that if we pass like Rabbi Yossi, that means that Matan Torah was given on the 7th of Sivan. So how can we say on Shavuos, Yom Matan Torah Seinu, Shavuos today always begins on the 6th day? We keep the 7th day because it's Feked Yoma, but according to our calendar, Shavuos is actually on the 6th. The first day of Shavuos is on the 6th. How can we say it's Matan Torah Seinu? If we pass like Rabbi Yossi, that means that we pass that it was actually on the 7th day of Sivan. So the Magen Avraham says an incredible thing. He says, really, the halacha follows the Rambam, that we don't require 6 onos. 6 onos is a chumrah. We're machmer for 6 onos. But really, in principle, we accept the opinion of the other shittas. The Rambam, who follows the other opinions of the Tanaim, that you don't need 6 onos. And that's why we say Zman Matan Torah Seinu. Because when it comes to liturgy, we're willing to follow that opinion. When it comes to Nida, we're machmer and we wait 6 onos. The Gemara goes on, discussing again the schedule of Matan Torah. The Gemara says that there are 3 things that Moshe did midaito on his own, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed to him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed to what he had done. One of them was that he postponed Matan Torah. One of them was he broke the luchos. Why did he break the luchos? How did he arrive at that remarkable decision? The Gemara says, he says Pesach is only one of the 613 mitzvahs, and the Torah says a ben nechar, someone who is a mumar, someone who's not faithful to the Torah, can't eat the Karim Pesach. Certainly the Jews who are mumarim, they've done avodah zarah, they've rejected the whole Torah, they can't get the luchos, and Moshe cast down the luchos. Chazal here seem to be saying that Moshe deliberately broke the luchos. There are other statements of Chazal, like as in Pirkei Eliezer, that Chazal seem to say that Moshe did not deliberately break the luchos. It says that when Moshe saw the egel, he became enervated, he could no longer carry the luchos, lo yeba koach, and he just cast them down. He threw them down because he saw he couldn't carry them, or he just dropped them because he couldn't carry them. That's Pirkei Eliezer. But the Bavli says it was a decision Moshe made to throw down the luchos. The Pirkei Eliezer says that the luchos, it says that the ksav, the writing of the luchos, flew out of the luchos. Before Moshe threw them down, the writing left them. The Radal in his commentary, David Luria in his commentary on Pirkei Eliezer says, why does the Pirkei Eliezer say that? What's the point of that? He says the point of that was there's a halachic issue here. He says Shemus, you can't just destroy Shemus, breaking luchos with Hashem's name, breaking the Torah that Hashem gave. You're not allowed to do that. He says. How are you allowed to just throw down luchos? He says you're not literally erasing. He says, but he assumes as a matter of halacha that breaking stones is like destroying the Beis Hamikdash. It's also included in the prohibition of lo sasum kain, don't treat Hashem the way Hashem wants you to treat avodah zarah. You're not allowed to do that. That's why the Pirkei Eliezer says the letters had flown out of the luchos because of the sin of the egel. That's why he was able to break them. That would be even if he decided to break them themselves, as per the Bavli. The Pirkei Eliezer seems to say that he dropped them because he couldn't carry them. But even if he broke them, it's not an issue of mechikas Hashem, of destroying Hashem's name, because the ksav had flown out, and therefore the prohibition would no longer apply. The Gemara goes on, also discussing the schedule of Matan Torah. The Gemara says the Jews left Egypt, the year they left Egypt on the 14th, and they shechted the Pesach on the 14th, on Erev Pesach, and on the 15th, Makas B'charos was that night, and then the Makas B'charos that occurred on the night before the 15th, and they left on the 15th, and it says that day was Thursday, Chamishi B'Shabbos. So here the Magen Avraham has another question. Another thing doesn't add up about Zman Matan Torah Seinu. If the Gemara says everyone agrees Matan Torah occurred on Shabbos and Pesach occurred on Thursday, that again means that it was on the 51st day and that again means that the Torah was given on the 51st day of Sefira. So not on the 50th as we celebrated, but on the 51st day of Sefira. Magen Avraham raises that question as well. And we actually paskin like both these things. Shabbos, the Torah was given on Shabbos seems to be universal. The idea that they went out on the Thursday, even though there's some debate about that in the Gemara, we paskin like that because that's the basis for Shabbos HaGadol. The Rishonim say, Tosfos says in the Gemara, why do we call it Shabbos HaGadol? Because if they left Mitzrayim on the 15th, and that was a Thursday, they shechted the Pesach on the Wednesday before that, and we know that they took the Pesach to inspect it for mumim, for blemishes, 4 days earlier. That means they took the Pesach on Shabbos, on the Shabbos before that. That's why we call it Shabbos HaGadol, because there was a great nace. The Jews took the Karban Pesach and began to prepare it for Shechita. Mitzrayim wanted to know, what are you doing? And the Jews said, we're going to take these karbanos and shech them. And they said Hashem is going to kill all the Bechorim that night. The Bechorim got really angry. They went to their parents and said, we're scared of this. Let the Jews go. Our lives are on the line. And there was a civil war, and they were killing each other, and that was the great nace that started on Shabbos HaGadol. So we do accept this idea that the Jews left on Thursday, and Shabbos HaGadol was the day they took the carbon. And we do accept that Matan Torah was on Shabbos, which would mean that the Torah was given on the 51st day of the Omer, not, as we always assume, on the 50th. That's another question of the Magen Avraham. Daf Peches, the Gemara says that the Jewish people, they encamped on the foot of the mountain. So Kipshuta, that means on the bottom of the mountain, adjacent to the slope of the mountain, they camped. The Gemara darshans a famous midrash that they were literally under the mountain. God picked up the mountain, held it over them, and he told them, if you're Makabel the Torah, good, and if not, then you are going to be buried right here. I will release this, and this will be your tombstone. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov says in the Gemara, Mikan moda rabba la raisa. This is called a moda. Moda is a legal term, it's a term of art. It means that if someone is forced to enter into a transaction against his will, he can issue a moda, he can execute a moda secretly in front of witnesses, that I am about to do such and such a transaction, I don't want to do it, I'm being compelled to do it, and subsequently he'll produce that document in front of Beis Din, and Beis Din will see that witnesses signed that he was forced to do it, and that will invalidate the transaction. This idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu forced us on threat of annihilation to accept the Torah, that means that we are not actually liable to keep the Torah. We can't be punished for it because it was forced on us against our will. Rava says, but true, even though that's true, so the Kabbalah's Torah was not really binding, still the Jews accepted the Torah of their own free will much later. 1,000 years later, in the time of Achashverosh, the Jews finally accepted the Torah of their own free will. Kimu v'kiblu, HaYehudim kimu, they accepted then, Masha kiblu kvar, they re-accepted the Torah. Rishonim ask a kasha. Tosfos here, Rishonim elsewhere ask a kasha. They say, Rava wanted to find a time the Jews actually were Makabel the Torah properly without fear. So you don't have to go to 1,000 years later, Achashverosh. Just say that Arvas Moav, right before entering Eretz Yisrael, Hargrizim and Harevel, the Jews again accepted the Torah. So why do you have to? Wasn't that enough to be considered why isn't that considered a Kabbalah Torah? The Gemara says in Sota, they Makabel the whole Torah, Hargrizim and Harevel. So why wouldn't that have been a good Kabbalah Torah? So we have two major terutzim in the Rishonim. Tosfos here in Shabbos brings Rabbeinu Tam that was still considered Bal Karcha. That was still considered compelled. Rabbeinu Tam is not very clear. He says Al Pia Dibur Haya Harei B'Bal Karcha. That was still considered under duress. Achashverosh was voluntary, but Kabbalah Torah and Arvas Moav was still considered part of the same duress as Kabbalah Torah at Sinai. It was all part of the same problem. The Ri is brought by the Mordechai. The Ri and the Maram are brought by the Mordechai as saying that no, the onus of Kabbalah Torah, of the mountain, was gone. Hashem had put down the mountain. There was no more mountain. That was finished. The reason why the Kabbalah of the Arvas Moav of Hargrizim and Harevel was still considered under duress is because they were still in the Midbar. They knew they needed Hashem to take them into Eretz Yisrael and give them Eretz Yisrael. They knew that if they weren't Makabel the Torah, Hashem might not cooperate with them. That was considered duress. The duress of being left in the Midbar or being left without Eretz Yisrael, that was the duress. So Rabbeinu Tam seems to learn that it was still an extension of the original Har Kegigis, the original mountain over their heads, was considered onus. And the Ri and the Maram learned that it was the duress of being abandoned in the Midbar and not being taken into Eretz Yisrael. These two approaches have major ramifications in the laws of Modah and Onus. The laws of Modah and Onus are the subject of extensive halachic literature and the laws of Gittin given under duress, other financial transactions that were performed under duress. There's a vast amount of discussion in the poskim about how to define duress and what kind of duress is sufficient to invalidate a get or to allow someone to escape a financial commitment, to reverse a sale. So one of the questions they discuss, that Shuv and the Marik discusses, what happens if someone threw somebody in jail, somebody applied some kind of duress, then he removed the duress, and then the person went ahead and did what the guy wanted him to do. Do you say, well, there's no more duress, and now it's voluntary? Or do you say, no, he threw you in jail once, he has the power to do it again, he did it yesterday, he can do it again today, so that duress is still considered present, even though if technically you're out, you know he can go back and pressure you again. This was a major machlokas among the late Rishonim. So the Marik says that people brought opposite rayas from our sugya. Some people understood Rabbeinu Tam to be saying that the original, Rabbeinu Tam at least is saying the original duress still applies because Hashem could have picked up the mountain again. There was no sweat off his brow to pick up the mountain again and then threaten them again with it. So you see that's still called an onus because he can always do again what he did the first time. Marik himself says just the opposite. If anything, the sugya implies otherwise, he says. He says, first of all, according to the Reed did not feel that the Har Sinai was considered a duress. We had to find new duress, the duress of not going into Eretz Yisrael, the duress of being abandoned in the Midbar. We did not consider the old previous duress of the Har Kegigis to be considered duress. And even according to Rabbeinu Tam, he says that's different because Hashem is that he's not a ben Adam vayinachem. Hashem doesn't change his mind. Hashem wasn't doing anything wrong by imposing the duress. He was supposed to be makabel the Torah. Hashem never changes his mind. Hashem is constant and true and faithful to his original purpose. So of course, in the case of Rabbeinu Tam says, of course in that case, they have to be afraid that if they're not makabel the Torah, Hashem will bring up that mountain again and threaten them again. That's true for a Kosh Baruch Hu, he says, but for a human who puts somebody in jail, Shelo Kedin, who's a violent a vigilante who goes around threatening people, he says, people change their minds, people are fickle, he says, and he's doing the wrong thing to begin with, so why should you assume he'll do the wrong thing again? So when it comes to people, everyone would agree to the that past duress that has been rolled back no longer counts. It's only the new duress that would be significant. In another tshuva, the Marik discusses the question of why is the duress of not being taken into Eretz Yisrael considered duress? If I promise you something, I say, I'll give you $1 million if you do what I want. But if you don't do what I want, I won't give you $1 million. That's not duress. You're not entitled to that money. I'll give you a gift if you do, and I'll take it away, and I won't give you the gift if I won't. If you're not entitled to it, why is that duress? So why is not taking them into Eretz Yisrael considered duress? So the Marik says that is called duress because first of all he says that's why the refocused on he would leave them in the midbar, he would lead them around to the midbar. That's actually inflicting harm on them. That's just not giving them a gift. That's actually causing them to suffer in the desert. And even the Maram, who added the phrase, that's why the Maram's version of the Re added the phrase of the midbar. Even the Re himself, who just focused on not bringing them into Eretz Yisrael, he says that they had been promised Eretz Yisrael, or Yisrael is considered Yerusha Me'avoseim, even though they weren't there yet, but they were entitled to Eretz Yisrael, it had already been granted to them, and therefore, even though they hadn't taken physical possession, not giving them that which they were already entitled is considered a form of duress. But certainly, not giving that, promising something and telling you the promise is conditional, that itself would not be considered a form of duress. Trumas Hadeshen learns from this Gemara also the general rule from this read, the general rule that not just actual pressure being applied is considered duress, even a threat that I will do something unfortunate to you is considered duress. He talks about a case where somebody was threatening, I will do something to you if you don't cooperate with me. That's also called duress, he says. Because here also he says that according to the read, they were afraid Hashem would do something. Hashem hadn't even threatened necessarily in that case. Hashem wouldn't take them into Eretz Yisrael. And certainly if a person threatens to do something wrong, certainly the threat itself is enough to be considered duress, even if they aren't actually pointing the gun, even if they haven't actually implemented their pressure. The fact that he's credibly threatening to do it is enough to be called duress, enough to be called a modah that would invalidate the commitment that he made. Daf Peites, the Gemara brings a story that when that when the Jews are going to be sinful and Hashem is going to want to punish them, so he goes to Avram, Hashem goes to Avram, Avram says, the Jews sinned, they should be wiped out for Kiddush Hashem. He goes to Yaakov, Yaakov says that they sinned, they should be wiped out. He goes to Yitzchak, Banecha Chatu, Yitzchak says, you're calling them my children sinned, they're your children also. Yitzchak mounts a vigorous defense, he says, I sacrifice myself for your honor, I'll take half, you'll take half. Yitzchak engages in all kinds of advocacy for the Jews, and the Jews are saved because of Yitzchak. That's why the pasuk says in Yeshaya, Ki ata avinu, you are our father. The Gemara understands the Jews were talking to Yitzchak. You, Yitzchak, are our father. Ki Avram lo yidanu. Avram doesn't know us. Avram is not helping us. He's not acknowledging us. The Yisrael yakirenu. Yisrael, Yaakov is not standing up for us. You, Yitzchak, you're our father. Then the pasuk ends. Ata Hashem avinu go aleinu me'olam shemecha. You Hashem are our God. The Medrash said, the Gemara says, after the Jews thank Yitzchak for his intervention, Yitzchak says that don't praise me, praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then they say, yes, okay, originally we thanked you, but now we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara says that originally Hashem goes to Avram and goes to Yaakov. Then when they both failed to stand up for the Jews, Hashem apparently wants someone to stand up for the Jews. Hashem says, Lo b'sabi tama v'lo b'dardiki eitza. Sabi, Avram, the elder of the patriarchs, has no tam, is not acting wisely. Lo b'dardiki eitza, the young one, Yaakov, the youngest of the patriarchs, he's not giving good counsel. I'm going to go to Yitzchak. So the various phrases of this Gemara and the preference for Yitzchak are the subject of a melitza, a kind of poetic expression in a celebrated tshuva in the Sefer Sheil Tshuvas Min HaShamayim of Rabbi Yaakov HaChassid. Rabbi Yaakov was one of the Balei Tosfos. He posed questions to heaven and was answered in dreams, all kinds of halachic questions. One of the questions he asked was that there was an ancient machlokes about tefillin. How many brachas do you make on tefillin in a normal case? You didn't talk in between them. You did what you're supposed to do. How many brachas do you make? So some Gaonim held that some of the Gaonim held you make two brachas, as we Ashkenazim do today. We make laniach tefillin on the shal yad and al mitzvah tefillin on the shal rosh. Others held the Rif held that in a normal case where you haven't been mafsed between the two tefillin, you only make one bracha. You make one bracha on the shal yad and no bracha on the shal rosh. When the Gemara talks about the bracha on the shal rosh, it's only if you were mafsik, but normally you only make one bracha. This, I believe, is still a machlokes today between Sfardim and Ashkenazim. Sfardim have followed the rule of the Rif, and Ashkenazim have followed the rule of the other Gaon. So Rabbi Yaakov, who was one of the Balei Tosfos, he asked this question of Shamayim, how many brachas should I make? And they answered, full of melitza, some from this Gemara, a tour de force of allusion and puns and literary biblical references. They told him, Lo b'sabi taimav, lo b'dardiki eitza. The phrase of our Gemara, the tam and the eitza is not in the sabi and the dardiki, not like the Gaon. Ki Avram lo yida'anu, v'Yisrael lo yakirenu. We don't follow those other opinions. Who do we follow? That's Brisi Yakimis, Yitzchak. We follow Yitzchak. He presumably means the Rif, or Yitzchak Alfasi. We follow the opinion of the Rif. Ki echad krasiv, ki echad. We follow the opinion. Another pasuk in Yeshaya, echad krasiv. We call only one. We make only one bracha. B'char etneu, gam barachia. So this tshuva, one of the Shmuel Eleket of the Sheil Tshuvas Min HaShamayim, he uses the language of our Gemara. It's a noteworthy thing that Yitzchak is being held up as the ultimate savior of Klal Yisrael. Usually we talk about Avram. Avram was the first. Avram recognized God. Avram is the father of Klal Yisrael. He was the first one to establish Judaism, to establish monotheism, and he set the whole thing in motion. We talk about Yaakov. Yaakov is the one who had the 12 tribes, Mitasar Shlema. Yaakov is the final one of the Avos. Yaakov represents Torah in some schools of thought. Yitzchak is a relatively lesser figure. He isn't the first. He isn't the last. He isn't held up as being unique in many ways. But in this Gemara says it was actually Yitzchak who was the savior of Klal Yisrael. Avram did not come through for us in this case. Yaakov will not come through for us in this case. Yitzchak is the one who comes through, and the Sheil Tshuvas Min HaShamayim uses this Gemara's discussion of Yitzchak to say that, or the response from heaven was that Yitzchak, or Yitzchak Alfasi, the Rif, that opinion is the last word on the question that you make only one bracha. We Ashkenazim still don't follow that. We follow the opinion of the other Rishonim that you make two brachos on your tefillin. In the course of discussing the sequence, he went to Avram, and Avram said, wipe them all out, destroy them, annihilate them, because they're Rishonim. So Avram said, okay, so I'm going to go to Yaakov. Why? So he said, because Yaakov had Tsar Gidul Banim. Yaakov had more children, so Yaakov had Tsar Gidul Banim. Maybe he'll be more compassionate on Klal Yisrael. This is reminiscent of a Gemara in Sanhedrin in a halachic context. The Gemara says, on the Sanhedrin, people who judge capital crimes, so there are various qualifications beyond the normal ones of being a dayan, beyond basic competence and uprightness and conduct. There are some additional qualifications to be eligible to hear capital cases. One of them is you can't be a zaki. You can't be a person who is elderly, or a sris, someone who is infertile, or someone who's ein labanim, someone who has no children. Why? So Rashi says, why can't you be old? Why can't you be someone who has no children? So Rashi says, someone who's old, shokach kvar tsar gidul banim, he's forgotten the toil, the trouble of raising children, ve'ena rachmani, and he doesn't have the same compassion. Apparently, taking care of a child, providing for what he needs, dealing with him, putting up with him, can stimulate rachmanus, compassion, in a person. Someone who doesn't have small children, who's too far removed from his child-rearing days, doesn't have the same compassion as a younger father does. The Adramah says a different explanation. He says old people have less patience, died some kitzara, he doesn't have as much rachmanis. I'll call upon him. This is similar to what Agamar says. Agamar seems more like Rashi. Agamar says that Avram, Hashem had higher hopes for Yaakov. After Avram let him down, he had higher hopes for Yaakov because he had Tar Gidul Banim, which would mean that he would have more rachmanis. A remarkable thing in general, the Gemara in Sanhedrin is saying that rachmanis, the milk of human kindness, is relevant to justice. We might think that justice is all about the law, ein merachman badin, and lo seder pnei dal, it's all about objectivity and logic and cold-heartedness, but it's not apparently. The Gemara says, at least when it comes to capital cases, rachmanis, remembering what it's like to raise a small child, can have a meaningful impact on the judge's jurisprudence. Daf Shabbos, the Mishnah talks about, back to Hotzah, carrying on Shabbos, the Gemara talks about a grasshopper. So the Tanna Kama says, Chagav Chai Tahar, a live kosher grasshopper, is kolshu, even no matter what size it is considered usable and a significant item. Why, Rashi says? Because people keep grasshoppers for kids to play with, as a pet, as a toy, so grasshoppers are considered significant objects. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if it's tameh, and he says the reason is because you can play with a tameh one, a non-kosher one as well. Tanna Kama says, no, the Gemara explains, Tanna Kama says no, that if it's not kosher, then the kid won't play with it because the father's afraid he might eat it, and the Gemara says he won't eat it, he'll make a hesped for it if it dies, he'll have a funeral for his pet grasshopper. I'll call upon him, it sounds from the Mishnah that it was common, it was a reasonable and standard thing to do, that a person would keep a grasshopper, a live grasshopper, as a pet for his children. Throughout the Sugis of Atzah, we find that the share of something being chashuv is something that people normally do, so apparently keeping a live grasshopper as a pet is something that is a normal thing to do in the time of the Mishnah. This doesn't directly impact the halacha, but this idea that pets are considered normal things to do has an impact on the general question discussed extensively by contemporary poskim: are pets muktzah on Shabbos or not? The Gemara later in the Masechta is going to say that balei chayim in general, live animals in general, are muktzah. But again, the Gemara is talking about cattle, livestock, animals, farm animals that have no use on Shabbos. There is a machlokes Rishonim in Tosfos, Marachar Zarua, and the Rush. There is a machlokes Rishonim whether this extends to animals that kids would like to play with, chicks that kids would play with sometimes. There is a machlokes whether the status of muktzah extends to such animals as well. And it's not clear what the halacha follows. However, some contemporary poskim have suggested that this is even those who are machmer on the animals that are child's play things, that's only animals that are primarily for being raised for food, like the chicks. You raise them so they can grow up and be chickens, and you can eat them, or they can have more eggs, and so on. But an animal whose entire raison d'etre, whose entire purpose is to serve as a toy or as a companion, like pets today, which are not raised. We're not going to eat our dog when he gets older. We're gonna take care. We're gonna play with our dog. So we're gonna play with our cat and bird and goldfish. So maybe those types of pets are not muktzah at all. This is a discussion among contemporary poskim. Many contemporary poskim, including Rav Adi Yosef, Rav Moshe Feinstein, have ruled that pets, even if they're designated for companionship and for human use, and which applies even on Shabbos, they are still muktzah, either because halacha doesn't recognize the idea of being a pet as a significant use to remove the status of muktzah, or because there was a low plug. Chazal made a general rule that all animals are muktzah, even though some of them might be pets. But the svara would seem to be on the side of the lenient poskim, that why should it be muktzah? If it's something that is designated for use on Shabbos and it doesn't involve any malacha that's asur, so why should it be muktzah? Nevertheless, many poskim, Rav Shmuel Zalman, there are conflicting things. He apparently considered the possibility it's not muktzah. It's not entirely clear what his conclusion was, but many poskim, including Rav Adi Yosef and Rav Moshe, felt that pets were indeed muktzah, although some understand Rav Moshe was lenient about pets not being muktzah, but in his published writings he seems to indicate that pets are muktzah. So some contemporary poskim say that it's machlokas, there is basis for leniency, especially because it's a drabanan, muktzah is drabanan, and because in Svara there's a strong argument to be made for the lenient view. Many poskim, including Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, quoted by one of his students, is that ideally one should be machmer, although there is basis for being lenient. And if some people are lenient about moving their pets on Yom Tov, there is some basis to rely on, and therefore you don't have to object and remonstrate with them if they follow the lenient view. With regard to petting pets, so many poskim just assume that's the same as moving the pet, that if you can't move it, you can't pet it, and if you could move it, you could pet it. And many poskim just assume that if you want to pet your dog or cat on Shabbos, that depends on the previous machlokas, and it would be kedai to be machmer. However, there are some authors who argue that even if we argue that pets are muktzah and cannot be moved, petting them stroking them would still be allowed. A couple of arguments they give, either because hair of an animal is not muktzah. The Bir Halachos seems to say this at one point, that even if an animal is muktzah, they talk about wiping your hands on the hair of an animal, even though you're moving the hair. Hair maybe is not muktzah. Or some say that moving muktzah, which won't remain in its new place, will just revert to its old place. When you release it, that's not considered tiltul, so just moving the hair, where the hair will just fall back down when you let it go, is not considered tiltul muktzah. So there are those who say that simply stroking a pet, you move the fur of the hair, but you don't actually move the body of the pet. There are those who say that would be mutter l'kuli alma. Many others disagree. And with regard to actually picking the pet up in your lap or playing with it in some way that you actually move it, or even part of it, that would be classic tiltul muktzah, and that would depend on the previous machlokas of whether a pet is considered muktzah on Shabbos or not.